Welcome back. I've got Dr. Patrick Porter online. Doctor, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Really looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for being here as well. So, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and then we'll jump into the conversation.
All right. Well, I'm actually a psychologist, but I got into neuroscience because of an invention back in the 80s. 1986, we invented the very first portable light and sound machine to help people maximize brain function, but mostly for pain control. Then we found out it does a lot of other things over the last 40 years. So that's where we're at.
It's funny how a single idea or an invention can open up the doors to all kinds of different things. And, no matter how much we study the brain, what a magnificent thing, and thing is not a right word for it, but it just fathom trying to design something that the brain does in any other aspect of life for a machine or computing or anything like that. It just doesn't come close to what the brain is capable of, and we're still discovering what it's capable of. So what interested you in pursuing that all those years ago?
Well, the main thing was my dad was a Silva instructor. He was a meditation teacher, and they used something called the Silva sound, which I later found out when I started going into the science was called an isochronic tone, which is a tone meaning basically it isolates time, encodes a certain frequency, and the brain will follow that frequency. The science is called frequency following response. So I got a job with a company called Light and Sound Research because I was very interested in how the brain functions with these sounds. And then LEDs came out back before 1986. For those listening, there was no LED screens, there was no cell phones, there was none of those things. But when they came out, we found out that the brain, actually every cell of your body, will respond through something called mirror neurons, and it will entrain to its environment. And so we started using that technology to entrain the brain to different brain frequencies that then in turn help people maybe get out of stress, anxiety, fear, and all the other things that we do. So it was a natural outgrowthing from my first book called Awaken the Genius. Actually, I talk about how I went from a second grade failure. Took, Sister Barbara loved me so much. I was in her class 2 years in a row, and so when I was held back, they said, "Hey, he's not very smart. He really can't learn anything." Well, my dad proved them all wrong. I became an honor roll student, three-sport captain. I have two PhDs now. So it's a matter of educating the brain and training the brain. And I've been doing it since I was, like 13 years old. So it's just an outgrowth of where I've been my whole life.
It's an incredible journey, and I'm so glad that your dad and yourself believed in you way back when. Because sometimes a false diagnosis like that can set the tone for people and would have robbed us and our society of all the amazing work that you've done so far. And that's why when everybody says don't pigeonhole people in things,
Right.
it's like you may just be approaching them a little bit differently, and all of a sudden you see completely different transformation on things. And it's funny how our body, and the brain in particular, because there's still all kinds of research and obviously the ton of stuff that you've done that basically helps us figure out, okay, how do we deal with the various issues that we deal with, whether it's stress, fatigue, the pain component. Eh, pain's a moneymaker. You can ask all the painkiller medication companies; they make a lot of money. And if we can somehow figure out a way to go, okay, wait a minute, let's attack this differently than what we've done before. All of a sudden, people that have been dealing with chronic pain for their entire lives, all of a sudden they don't feel it, and
Yeah.
because of the research that you've done and the work that you've created over these years, it it's life changing. I mean, literally, it's life
Yeah.
changing for anybody that's dealt with any type of chronic illness, whether it's pain or fatigue or heart situations, all of that. Figuring out, okay, how do we communicate with the brain to address it? Because our brains, I mean, to make this as simple as possible, our brains are designed to make sure that we're our best optimum self. And if we can talk to the brain and say, hey, how do I make this so I am the way you want me to be? Let's do it. And it's again, the research is fascinating for sure for this person that the only reason I passed ninth grade science class was Mr. Burrell did not want to see me again. Unlike your sister, he did not want to see me again. So I took that C, and that was probably my most favorite grade of all time because I didn't deserve that one, but I took it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Dan. But no, Dan Burrell was the teacher's name. I should look him up and see if he's still
Yeah,
around and send him a thank you card. But so in all the things that are going on now, with research and science and things like that, what are some innovations that you've seen in recent years? And, what are some things, and I wasn't planning on asking you about AI, but I'm curious to, your take on that and how we can leverage it to further learn more about the brain and everything that we so desire to learn about it.
sure. I'll talk about two studies that we've done actually that talk right to what you were just talking about. We did a study in Brazil in Florianopolis, one of the largest universities in Brazil, and we did a opioid study. Opioids are only approved for 4 weeks of use, but people get on them and they don't get off them. And most people don't understand pain only happens in the brain. It only happens in the brainwave called beta. So the more stress you have, the more pain you have. And I always say you can't have a pill without the skill. So what we did is we did a study down there, and it's going to be published here in the next few weeks, where we showed the people using brain tap at the same time. Everyone had opioids when they had their surgeries because the doctors wouldn't let us do it without it. I had pain-free surgery with my shoulder with nothing more than my dad hypnotizing me into believing that I wasn't going to have pain, and I didn't have pain. They did a shoulder surgery, but they didn't want that. So, but after 4 weeks, we told our group stop taking your opioids. We also told the other group, it's 4 weeks, get off them if you can. We didn't give them any support like they do. They give out the pills without any counseling, and what happened was after 6 weeks, our group had gotten off them immediately. No one was on, no, after 4 weeks, all off of opioids. The other group was still on them. When they did the 3 month check-in, they're still on them because their body became dependent upon the pill instead of the skill. We have opioid receptors in our brain, and if we train our brain to activate those opioid receptors, we don't need painkillers because the brain is reacting to that medicine. It's not doing anything for us. That pain medicine is basically putting a black light over the engine light in your car, saying, "Hey, everything's okay," because we can't see the idiot light. But that pain is a signal to the body. It's important. You don't want to just take pain away because there's something wrong. But if you know it was a surgery or there was an accident and it's now healing, sometimes we have what's called phantom pain. That kind of pain we should be able to minimize or get rid of. The other study that I'm actually going back to India here at the beginning of March this year, we did a study with stroke victims, and we showed that we actually beat out neurofeedback. What they do in 40 sessions of neurofeedback, we proved you could do with 15 sessions of brain tap using light, sound, and vibration to train the brain to get out. Because what happens when there's only 4 reasons somebody has a problem with their brain. Their thoughts are not right. They basically we know that negative thinking actually shortens your life by between 12 to 6 years. So a negative thinker actually doesn't live as long as a positive thinker. So you want to be positive, look at life as a challenge rather than a threat. Number two, we have trauma, which we can't do anything about. You have to go through the healing. We have a really good trauma system in the world today. Western medicine is very good for trauma. It's not very good for wellness. It's really good for trauma. So we have to go get the trauma. But once you get the trauma repaired, you got to work on that. And then we have toxins. Most people don't realize that toxic buildup from our body happens every day. And if we don't get to level 4 sleep, we don't get the amyloid plaques, all those things out of the brain that naturally happen through what's called the glial lymphatic system, which was, imagine this, Michael, you're in physiology class, you're going to be a doctor in 2015. They don't even know about this part of the body. It's not even, nobody knows about it. How long have we been looking at the human body? For at least 100 years, 200 years. Nobody knew about the glial lymphatic system, but there's somebody in Denmark that's doing a sleep study and finds this system of the body that only opens up during level 4 sleep. And 2/3 of the world isn't sleeping, which means that part of their body is not working. So it's like you have a muscle that atrophies from lack of use. What happens, unfortunately, is the brain tries to detox while you're awake. That's in essence like trying to paint your home while it's on fire. You can't do it. It's not going to work. So in this study, what we showed was that we can change when you have a stroke. Unfortunately, what happens is you start doubting your body's capacity to operate. And if you've never had a stroke, you just believe, hey, every day my heart's going to beat, I'm going to breathe efficiently, I'm going to metabolize, I'm going to do these things. So we have to work on those things. So I believe so. There's thoughts, traumas, toxins, and technology, because technology is driving people's behaviors now. Because people are looking at screens all day. They're not getting up and moving. And in order to be really brain fit, you've got to have movement in your life. You've got to eat right. You cannot think a bad diet, and you've got to do some kind of brain fitness. So we talk about these things all the time. One of the things that we noticed in a study we did with Julia Art called the Peak Performance Study, which is now a TED Talk, we showed that if these Googlers and Microsoft programmers would take a 20-minute break doing brain tap in the middle of the day, they got 26% more work done. So that's why with my new book, The Brain Fitness Blueprint, we're talking about changing the culture in people's work environments. You don't need a coffee break. What you need is a brain break, because it's a very different environment out there. You're not in a factory lifting things heavy all day long and working. You need to reset your brain and give you more brain power.
In the last 40 to 50 years, where yeah, we're on these screens, we're typing, and even our smartphones, we're on them all the time, which causes obviously eye strain and physical strain and everything else. And it it just creates all kinds of challenges. And I think, of course, we know it can cause stress too, based on what we're consuming. If we're on social media all the time, and depending on how the algorithm is behaving that day, you could be fed all kinds of things that could upset you, or depending on who you follow, maybe entertain you. But again, it all takes away from it. And I love how you mentioned that that fourth level of sleep that 2/3 of the world don't get. Our body repairs itself when we sleep. And if we don't get good sleep, guess what? The repair job's not happening. And that's why you see prolonged stress and clogged arteries and all kinds of other things going on, because it all is connected. We're asking our brains to do a lot, but we're not making it very easy for our brains to do it. And I think that's where, you know, your study, the work, the brain tap, all of that plays a big part in helping us be healthier. And if we're healthier, guess what? We're going to live better. We're going to be more productive. We're not going to get stressed out as much on things. And it just can improve everything for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, when people
So,
understand, yeah, I think when people understand that life happens through you, not to you, it makes a big difference. A lot of people wake up every morning thinking that somehow the world's against them. Nobody's really against you. They're just for them. You got to figure out what you're for and then go after it. I always tell people every morning you wake up and it's like you're at the 100-yard dash. You're looking down the track and you go, I didn't train for this 100-yard dash. Well, you're part of the human race. It's called that for a reason. It's a race. Every morning you get up, you're racing. So, Deepak Chopra said it best. He said, 97% of what's going to happen to you tomorrow, you know about today. So, what are you pretending not to know? Plan for it, train for it. Prepare your brain, your body. Eat the way a champion would. We're doing a program right now with Dr. Amen, sleep doctor. It's called Sleep Like a Champion for sports, because it's so important. Sleep is the first step. If you're not getting your sleep, you can't do anything. I don't care if you take the world's greatest supplements, you're not going to metabolize and digest them. It's a waste of your money until you improve your sleep. And you can't improve your sleep with just doing a supplement. It has to be an activity. You have to figure out how to maybe do some breathing techniques. Like there's a good one called 4-8 breath you can do right before bed. You breathe into the count of 4. This triggers your sympathetic system, which is your fight or flight. And then you breathe out to the count of 8, which triggers your parasympathetic. Most people never do this consciously. They wait till life triggers it, like you trigger a response. You want to start controlling these reactions so that you go more into a flow state, especially for a leader. When you're thinking about leadership, you want to control your state. You don't want to look out of control to your whoever you're leading. You want to always be in a state of at least internal control. If you can't control the external world, you want to at least control your internal world.
yeah, and as a leader, you want to You demonstrate that you know what you're doing. Or if you're sarcastic, you'll say, I have no idea what I'm doing. Of course, everybody goes, hey, yeah, you do. And maybe you don't, but you got them thinking that you can do it. And if they believe in you, guess what? You should believe in you too. Because
Right.
none of us really know what we're doing. We just kind of figure it out as we go and use the deductive reasoning and hope for the best. But it boils down to, I don't want to make this a sleep study kind of thing, but I know everyone, we've had a quote unquote bad night of sleep. And I know what that does to me. I feel it and I go, okay, I did not sleep well. Okay, what am I going to do today to mitigate that as best I can to make sure that tonight I sleep better? And not go around mopey. I had a bad night's sleep. Yeah, it's a fact. I didn't sleep well last night. Okay, what am I gonna do? Rest. Okay, breathing exercise. Make sure that the food that I eat today, as much as I want to order whatever is on Uber Eats or DoorDash, what foods are going to nourish me today? So it's like, okay, let's really go after this to make sure that I'm getting the right rest and do daily check-ins or frequent check-ins throughout the day with myself going, okay, how am I feeling? How's my cognitive abilities? So do I feel fresh? Do I still feel lethargic? If I feel lethargic, okay, look at my schedule. What do I have going on today? Okay, is there anything that I might need to maybe shift to another day or another time when I'm quote unquote more with it? And a lot of people don't have that flexibility, but most people do. Even if you're working for a company and you've got workloads and you know when things are due, you can move some things around. And just clear your boss in on it too. So, okay, if I work on this day instead of this, I'm not feeling 100%, but I know I can do this and I don't have to worry about it. Have that dialogue. And then at least that way you're kind of, okay, even though I'm feeling lousy, I got that done. And all of a sudden you start feeling better. Your outlook, you're like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit better. And every time that I started doing that, usually by midday, I feel fine. I don't feel the elements of not sleeping well. I'm like, okay. I'm like, okay, why did that happen that way? Well, I set myself up for success, is what I did, and recognized it and basically had, a little bit better understanding of, who I am as a physical being. And I find a lot of people, I think that's why your work is so important. A lot of people really don't know who they are, both mentally or physically. And they just they feel well, but they don't really recognize it. They're kind of off in many ways, and which is kind of sad because that's no way to exist.
Yeah. Well, they say that most people don't feel from the neck down. So, it's not a cerebral game, it's an emotional game. Emotion drives behavior. So, if you can get in what you did actually is one of the things that we teach is you have to have long-term thinking. So, once you have a plan, if you don't know where you're going, that creates anxiety, stress, and it's like you burn a lot of energy doing those things. But once you have a plan like a roadmap to where you're going to go for the day, the brain kind of puts it on autopilot, says, okay, I got this. But if it doesn't know where you're going, they say if you don't know where you're going, anywhere will get you there. So you have to have that plan. I think it's a good point you made that if you're not up to the task for that, then you change, you reprioritize because whatever task you're doing, you should want to do it 100%. And put all of your effort into it and make sure that you get the best outcome possible. And when you start doing that, the brain will, again, that's looking at as a challenge. What's the challenge? Maybe you're not up for it. You can't change it. What are you going to do? What questions are you going to ask? When Einstein was asked, if I only had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended upon it, I would take 55 minutes to create this perfect question to ask about the problem. Then I could solve that problem in 5 minutes. Most people jump right into the problem solving and they don't question, what is it about? Why are we doing this? What's happening? What will make an outcome happen? What would be a win-win scenario? They don't ask the right questions and they just think they know where they're going. And the brain operates best with questions. We know that rather than blunt responses, in ultimatums. The brain hates ultimatums. It wants to have flexibility and freedom and creativity. And then it can solve problems. If you give it, in fact, I tell people that addiction is actually really a phobia because you only have one solution for an infinite number of problems. So a creative mind says, hey, at any moment in time, there's an infinite number of solutions. You kind of flip the switch. You say, hey, there's a number of ways I could do this, but this is one way. What do you think about it? Maybe you have a better way. Maybe we can talk it through. There's all sorts of different ways to free up and liberate this creative brain that we have. That's when energy flows, because it's an energy game. When you were born, Michael, and this is everyone listening as well, you were the smartest you were ever going to be, believe it or not. Your brain was operating at 18.1 volts. You had 100 billion neurobit processor. From that day on, you started doing something called neural pruning. You started unplugging that brain because in order to learn something, you had to get neurons to wire and fire together. They weren't all firing and wiring together. You learned a language. Now, if you know more than one language, you kept a circuit alive that helps you to learn more languages. But if you didn't learn a second language by the age of 7, that language programming goes dormant and it's very difficult to learn another language. My science officer knows 6 languages. He was just with me in India. He started speaking Hindi before we left the country. I said, what are you doing, Francisco? He said, we've been here for 3 weeks. For him, learning a language is easy because he knows 6 languages. So the brain has the circuits for it. And we are more capable than what you think. Our brain is more capable. And going back to one of the earlier comments you said about what other people think about you, I tell people they don't have the right, and you don't have the right to let them tell you about yourself. You don't even know yourself. You're so much more capable than what you're doing right now. I mean, think about it, like X-Men. MIT just discovered something 10 weeks ago. They put out a report. They said that a human thought extends 10,000 miles away from the person having that thought, and it goes into a web of information like the internet. Now, that's pretty spooky for MIT to be coming out with something like that. That means that there's some level of consciousness or someplace, when people think, hey, I visualized this outcome and I got it, or you visualized, doing some job or winning some award, then you got it. Then all these unseen forces that come to work for you, where are they coming from? What's happening there? I mean, science is starting to sound a little bit more like a metaphysical novel than it is a science background. So we're learning that there's something called the electron transport chain. Most people forget about the body. That means that we are all light. In essence, everything you eat, everything you drink, everything you think, everything you do is converted to electrical impulses and energy in the brain, transferred through the body. And even our NIH, if you go to their website and put in biosphere, they claimed in 1994 that they discovered a field of energy around all living beings, extends about 3 feet, and all illness starts in that field. So that field of energy, we're talking about energy medicine, we talk about light, sound, and vibration. And we take for granted these screens or the EMF pollution we're getting, all these things, but our cells are all interacting with it. So, inside of us right now, I don't want to get too far into the weeds with everyone, but MIT also came out with a study about 6 weeks ago that showed our DNA, which if I could take your DNA, Michael, staple it to the floor, it would reach to Pluto. This viscous material, it's like a crystal. They've now found that it absorbs information, not only from our sun called the circadian rhythm that changes our bodies. Like if we don't get to bed by 10 o'clock, we don't make as much melatonin. We don't get to bed by 11, we don't clean our liver. This is all timed to our sun. Now, they found that we are actually absorbing codes from the center of the universe. And then those codes are being sent to our body as instruction sets. So what's really going on here is, so when we're in a state of stress and anxiety, it's like we're in a tide pool and it's taking us here and there. But once we get focused, and your podcast here with the Breakfast Club, we always tell people when you win the morning, you win the day. So when you think about what's going on in the morning, you set your compass. What are you going to accomplish today? How are you going to do it? And it all starts with your mind. No, nothing happens. When Ralph Waldo Emerson said, the ancestor to every action is thought. So we have to have the thought. So if you're not taking time, even while you're sipping your tea or your coffee or your water in the morning, your juice, whatever it is, and planning out your day, you're losing out. We call it brain priming in brain fitness. You prime the brain for those meetings you're going to have, those conversations you're going to have. You give your brain those neural pathways time to warm up, just like you'd warm up your muscles. You're going to warm up your brain. And we find that what you anticipate, visualize, you begin to realize, because it shows up in your field of experience and expression. So, I think the biggest thing with brain fitness is think about your life as the teacher. And if you're not getting the grade you want, you've got to upgrade you got to update your game because your body keeps score in the form of pain, discomfort, weight, all these things. And your life keeps score by your wallet, things like how much money you're making. What are you doing? Are you making the right decisions? And it keeps score by your friends, your family members, your coworkers, because social activity is so important for brain fitness. If you don't have a good community, you're losing out. It's great to have podcasts like this to listen to and things like that. But it's also great to have somebody you can sit down and chat with and brainstorm with, and that will call you on your BS and help you through things, and a friend that'll help you at 12 at night if you get a flat tire on the freeway, things like that, so that you have that sense of security.
Yeah, it's start your day the right way is something, it's the name of the company, breakfast, favorite meal of the day. It's the beginning of the day. When you do that, you're setting yourself up for success and not just, looking at your calendar going, okay, these are the things I'm doing today, but also prepping yourself. Okay, how can I make myself the best version of me today to serve myself and serve others? If you do that every day, watch what happens to your life. So, Doctor, I love this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and all this very important work?
Yeah. Well, they can go to braintap.com. They can actually get a 14-day free trial. So you're not going to be charged for the 15th day. So if you don't like it, 70% of the people that go there and try that out will keep. I mean, we only have a 4% churn on our app, which means people love it. The average user uses it 27 times a month. So it's free. If you're one of those people that aren't sleeping well, 90% of people report back that over that 14-day trial, they have their best night's sleep. So that's one way to test it. I always say test, don't guess. It's free right now. So go ahead and go there. And then, of course, they can find me at drpatrickporter.com. They can find other information about me personally. But the company is probably more important. So you can get the technology that help you to reboot your brain and get your best brain aligned with your best self and have your best day. So,
So, well, I'll definitely have all that in the show notes. So, Doctor, thank you again for your time in this very, very critically important research. It's making the world better. So, thanks again for being on the show.
okay. Thank you for having me, Michael.